want to do is I want to go over a couple of statistics, and this is generally referring to African Americans, but really anyone of color. It's relevant to hear where these statistics are coming from and how sobering they really are. First of all, like this, and I got this from mentalhealthamerica.net. These are just statistics. It says that African American males are 20% more likely to report serious psychological stress and distress than adult whites. Also, adult African American males are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites, meaning sad, hopeless, and worthlessness. Here's another thing. African Americans of all ages are more likely to be victims of serious violent crime than our non-Hispanic whites, making them more likely to meet the diagnostic criteria for what's called PTSD. Trust me, in my line of work, I see this all day long. People that live in inner city or heavily African American neighborhoods are exposed to PTSD on levels that no one could comprehend unless you live in those kinds of places. So trust me, I get that one very, very clearly. And when I say African American, I'm really kind of focusing on the males today, but African American females also suffer huge amounts of stress, anxiety, and depression, far above that of whites in general compared to adult whites who live in this country. There's another thing also. One of the things that African American males, I'm going to kind of focus on the males today, deal with, but again, it refers to women and men, but I'm really focusing on the men. They believe that depression is a personal weakness. And this is significantly higher than the overall percentage of 54%, where people still look at depression as you're lazy, you're a loser, you need a kick in the pants, you're worthless, come on, snap out of it. So 63% of African Americans believe that depression is a sign of personal weakness. Also, why do African Americans not get treatment for depression? Here it is. Denial, 40%, number one. Embarrassment/shame, 38%. So top two reasons are denial and embarrassment. It can't be happening, not true. And if I admit that I am having issues with depression, it's shameful, it's embarrassing. And African Americans were less likely to take an antidepressant for treatment of depression. Only 34% would take one if it was prescribed by a doctor. So there you go. African Americans in general have much higher rates of, I don't want to touch this stuff, based on cultural issues like, if I admit to it, I'm weak. And it affects males even more. In general, males across the board, more than women, are less likely to admit that I'm depressed because weak. Now, here's something else I wanted to share. A 2010 CDC study, which is Centers for Disease Control out of Atlanta, African Americans have the highest rate of suicide at more than 12%, despite having a lower lifetime risk. But suicide is the third leading cause of death for black males ages 15 to 24. Third leading cause. So, what's going on? People in the African American community are finally starting to talk about this issue and bringing depression to the forefront. And there was a movie that came out called Black Pain in 2015, and one of the filmmakers, Kenneth K.T. Nelson, said this. He said he had depression particularly after the suicide of his friend, an actor named Lee Thompson Young. He goes, when you're depressed, it's paralyzing, he said in a phone interview when he was with his co-producer, Squeaky Moore. He said, for a lot of people, some say you need to man up. But for black men, we're taught not to deal with our feelings. And the writer, Madison Gray, of this article said he agreed. Because he was describing the situation for himself. He was having a really rough weekend. And he said, he goes, man up. But he goes, how many times when he flew off the handle, when he kept it all bottled up, rather than actually talking about it and getting it out of his system and getting that depression and anxiety out of him. And he said, how often does depression turn into anger and rage? And he was making a good point by saying how many lives could have been saved, how many caps and gowns could have been worn, how many prison beds left unoccupied if, he's using the word brothers, had the chance to open up. Now he made this comment also. He was talking about just the anger, And he ends the article by going like this: because at the other end of the spectrum, the other side of it, rather than man up, is man down. So he was talking about how if you don't get things out, they build up, they build up, they build up, man down. Now, I want to talk about how rappers, I got this article from Rachel Harper, made a comment talking about rappers talking about their struggles with depression. She says this, interesting part of this. She says that depression and hip hop are often seen as being at odds with each other. How do you have the two together? Because here, hip hop is a genre that's competitive and fueled by machismo. So you have this, that hip hop can be an environment where clinical depression or other mental health issues are brushed off as weaknesses. And you can't have any weaknesses when you're calling yourself a boss or the Don. The top guy can never show that he's weak or mortal, because then he's not in charge, he's not in control. And a lot of hip hop, a lot of rap is based on I am in control. Now it's interesting here that she talks about this also. Researchers have found suicide rates have doubled between 1993 and 2012 amongst African American boys. Interesting. Now, here's another comment. And also, where its lineage, rap, hip hop, makes an extension of the African American community where depression and mental illness are often destigmatized. Stigmatized, that if you have it, you're weak, you're weak, you're weak, you're weak. Now, here are different rappers with their own perspective on it. It's kind of interesting how they come across with this. Here's Fat Tony, picture of him. He's out of Houston, Texas, out of the screw culture, okay? And he goes like this. He says, as a whole, depression really isn't spoken about too openly in rap music, but it's also not spoken about too openly in the black community, period. Mental health in general is kind of shielded away from. Don't want to talk about it. Now, Archie Green, 30 years old, hometown Cleveland, Ohio. He said like this: depression in African American culture is not really talked about enough, especially in African American male culture. It's because the African American male is depicted as portrayed as very alpha male, and depression is a sign of weakness. And he goes, to me, for me to be a real artist, I have to tell everything that's going on with me. So he talked about his issues with depression, and then he realized after a friend said to him, hey, Archie, you need to get some help. He said, I'm so thankful and grateful that I started seeing a therapist because it's healthy. Even if you don't think you're going through depression, I would recommend it, especially if you're creative. It's good to talk it out. Now then, what's funny to me, or just interesting, was how you have the next names coming up are so speaking about, almost in my mind, that they are dealing with mental illness. Here's one from Bronx, New York, YC the Cynic. And he goes like this: I think depression is pushed to the background and hidden in hip-hop, just like it is in the black community. Mos Def says, whatever happens with hip-hop is whatever happens with us. We don't even suggest therapy to our family. Why? We don't even think of depression as a mental illness. Usually it's like, hey, why are you sad for? We don't got time for that. We're too busy creating, too busy living. So actually having any thoughts of how I'm really feeling, no. Let's not talk about this. Now, here's a name. This is irony to me. 23 years old, from my hometown of Brooklyn, New York. What's his name? Little Payne. And he goes like this. He's talking about where he says, the irony of it, and he was saying how even when he was in the neighborhood, because however you get your feelings out is how you deal with it, but he was saying like, wow, this is what goes on, and people are relating to this and trying to deal with this. And he was saying how where he was living, he heard someone screaming at some lady, man, cheer up, cheer up. You know how many people in the hood that's depressed? We don't go around killing ourselves. That's what some white people do. And he's like, in the black community, it's like talking about it out in public is taboo. We can't admit we have any issues. Now here's another person. This is Samus, a female rapper. She's coming out of Ithaca, New York. That's upstate New York for those. And she made a comment. She goes, I often hear that rhetoric even in discussions about legalization of certain drugs and how self-medication is often a part of being black in this country. That if you don't self-medicate, you can't relate, you can't cope, you can't fit in. And she's saying issues related to self-medicating is often over kind of looked and uses a way to talk about how rap isn't about anything. But if you're thinking about mental health, a lot of those songs are talking about is I can't cope with the world I'm currently in. So it's highly stressful. So this is interesting to me how self-medication is often a part of being black in this country. So you realize how people and rappers taboo, 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 taboo. What was interesting to me was this. I looked at something I'd read before, and here's a comment that was made. Sasha Villette, who did her dissertation for University of Texas, goes like this. She said, this is people who are talking to her. She described the experiences reported by those who use syrup or listening to Screw by saying, there is no pain, no fear, no worry. Time slows down, life slows down, moments last. It's another thing also, and the guy goes like this. A fellow user said, yeah, but plus you can say that about any kind of drug use, how it just like makes you calm down and relax. But syrup's different. It helps you deal with the crappy part. That's not the right word, but helps you with the crappy part of your life. Makes you just go with the flow more, slows the blank down. That made sense to me now, and I understand how the concept works from. Slows everything down. Wow. Slows it down. You don't got to deal with the bad parts of your life. That numbness. Here's another point also. There's another comment that was made, was very, very interesting too. In the song, the 3-6 Mafia 2000 hit, Sipping on Some Scissor, all right, it goes like this. One of the lines goes, I got the wet promethazine, thick orange and yellow tuss, hydrocodone on the hands, knock you out, make you fall asleep. Make you fall asleep, not having to deal with reality. So I'm listening to the music, I drink it, I lose my focus, I lose my inhibitions, you know what happens? Everything slows down. Now here's a comment, and I look at this song differently now. This came from Macklemore from the album Other Side, the song Other Side. It goes like this, and here's the ones I'm going to take out. Will leave you broke, depressed, and emotionally vacant. First two lines in that song. There is no way to glorify this pavement. Syrup, Percocet, and an eighth a day will leave you broke, depressed, and emotionally vacant. And then it goes by the end, it goes, I'd sip that blank, pass out, or play PlayStation. Again, losing touch with reality. I just went to a conference on gambling, and they brought in a speaker who talked about, the excessive use of playing games. And when he said, when you play video games, you're not having to deal with what's going on around you. I'd sip that blank, pass out, or play PlayStation. Different world. Not in this one. A more relaxed world. And finally, there was an article written by Max Weinstein. And in that article, it goes like this. The last paragraph is interesting. It goes, we say, rest in peace, Pimp C, and rest in peace, DJ Screw, but we don't stand up and resist the things that kill them. Drug use is a symptom of a much bigger problem. People who use prescription drugs are in pain, and without addressing that pain, we choose to ignore causes and instead focus on the results. Hip-hop won't solve that pain, and maybe nothing will. And I want to focus on the whole point is like the whole thing about the lean is about slow it down, sleep, disassociate. Don't have to deal with what's going on. What's fascinating to me about depression, the lean, and the hip hop is you got like a triangle, okay? You have this. And let's say you have hip hop here, and you have the lean, and you have your depression, and everyone looks at it as, well, it's separate, it's separate, it's separate, but it's not. It's all connected. It's all connected. And I realize that now, after listening to dozens of songs, reading multiple articles, listening to people talk about it, it's connected. If you are supposed to enjoy something that is music, that's creative, that should be you, that should define you, but you need something to take you out of the picture, that tells me you're not happy with yourself. Because you need a stimulant, you need the lean, you need the coding, you need the action to do basically this, to slow you down, because you're not happy with your reality. And all of these videos that we have made is really to talk about things that are prevention oriented. Why can't you enjoy the music by listening to the music, by listening to the artist, by being in the moment as the moment is taking place? When you need an artificial stimulant to enjoy what's going on, you're depriving yourself of ultimately of happiness, of feeling good about yourself, and what you're doing is you're in pain. You're not happy. Anytime you got to take something artificial to make you feel happy or to take you out of reality, says to me how many people in music who you think with the creative juices flowing would love what they do or happy what they do, but you realize how powerful that depression is. And if you can't talk about it and you can't share it and you can't express it to people around you or find a mental health person you can talk to, you're carrying around a monkey on your back that's ultimately going to destroy you. Because let me clarify something about methamphetamine usage, for instance. They say that when you take methamphetamine the first time, the high is so intense because the neurons in the brain haven't been dusted with it. So it's a high you can never capture again, because what happens with addicts who get involved with methamphetamine is they take more and more and more and more, and you get coated with the methamphetamine residue. So what happens is, common sense, the more you take, the less you get back in enjoyment out of it. You take more and more and more until eventually your heart blows out of your face, out of your mouth, and you're dead. That's what happens with methamphetamine. It's the same thing with the lean, I realize, in a different level. By sipping it, by making it into a drink, which is brilliant, it's not lethal. It has a purple color. I throw in some candy. I throw in some soda. It's innocent. I'm just putting in a drop of codeine for a little color, a little splash, a little on the rocks, slursh it around, splush it around, and then sip it to make the experience last. But like any addictive situation, and lean codeine is an opiate, it's going to mess you up, going to make you addictive to it. You're going to have more and more and more till ultimately it's going to be a contributor to killing you. Because you can't get off the cycle of, why am I doing this in the first place? Because I'm not happy with myself. And it was interesting today to go into this 2-day gambling, conference. At a certain point it becomes repetitive, but you see the same causes. People who are drawn to gambling, anything addictive, they tend not to be happy. They can't push away. Like I can gamble to a point. I could eat to a point. I could, I need this to a point. But for certain people with that addictive personality or that unhappy personality, that depressive personality, they can't say no, and it becomes the repetitiveness, because ultimately you're not happy with yourself. And that is why everything is connected. And the question you guys start asking yourself, for those that are watching this video, is why? Why do you have to follow the pack? Why do you have to follow the group? Why can't you enjoy the music for what it is for itself and ultimately be happy with who you are? All the videos that I've done, and now I think it's going to be, this is number 32, is designed to do one thing: make you look at things in a different perspective, go after a preventative situation, and say to yourself, I have the right and I deserve to be happy. And this video is not just marketed for African Americans, but it's talking about a situation of a culture that deals with so much depression because of so much stress, because of so much anxiety, because of so much PTSD. Understandable. Oh, I get that. I'm not immune to that. But you gotta take it off your chest, get it off your breast, talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, it's going to destroy you. It's going to lead to anger, frustration. You want to take it out on somebody. And that somebody could be your spouse, could be your girlfriend, could be your kids, could be your girlfriend's kids. And boom, you snap and you unleash because you couldn't get what was bothering you off your chest. And what happens? And that Samus made a good comment. I never thought of it like that. Being black, you got to be high to live in America. You got to be on something because it's too tense life. And I get it and I understand it. But all I'm saying is look in that mirror tonight. Watch the video, look in that mirror and say to yourself, what path am I heading to? I need to learn to let go in a positive and productive way. And I got to think on what I'm doing. That's it. Again, we want your comments. We want your thoughts. We are releasing merchandise. It is coming. It's taking a little bit longer than we thought, but it is coming. Sunridge of Nevada. Please watch the videos. Give us your thoughts and your comments. We love them. Everyone take care. We'll be back with new ones next week. Thanks. Bye.